After BC introduced its foreign buyers tax, there was a clear divergence between Toronto and Vancouver's housing markets. The latest Vancouver data shows February sales were up from January, but still posted a 42% decrease on a year-over-year basis. The average Vancouver home price fell about 3%. In Toronto, sales were up by about 6% year over year. Prices shot up more than 28%. Mr. Lamb does say that a foreign buyer's tax in Toronto could kill the new condo market, affecting Ontario's economy, and in turn could lead to a Canada-wide recession. Let's get some perspective on what he had to say. Brad Lamb joins us in studio now. Good to have you with us again.
Good to be here.
Okay, so let's talk first of all about the fact that you were saying this could lead to a recession. You're not saying it will lead to a recession.
Correct.
Okay, so from that basis, Jameson was just telling us that 10% of new builds in Toronto, in the condo market, that's a foreign owner. Does that jibe with your experience?
Well, as you alluded to earlier, the actual numbers, the industry knows what it is, but the government doesn't.
Right.
My suspicion, based on my observations and being on the ground, is significantly higher than that. What I believe to be correct is that the amount of foreign investors affecting the resale market, the existing stock of real estate, is insignificant in the city of Toronto. Where it is very significant is in the purchase of new unbuilt condominiums from floor plans. Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, you'd have to be an idiot to believe this was locals buying. When a 900-unit complex sells out in 2 weeks without a sales office being opened anywhere in the city, to speak of, with model suites and so on, that's not local people with their strollers walking in to buy happy homes. Those are investors. And that's a good thing. We want, a condominium building today is a luxury apartment building. 50% of it is probably rented, maybe 60%, in most categories, right, even in the high-end category. That's a good thing. Nobody's building apartment buildings in the city. We want those. We need rentals, and that's the only industry right now, that's the only side of the industry that's providing rentals. So we don't want to discourage foreign investors or local investors from buying unsold, non-existing inventory to then ultimately have it built by builders to create that inventory few years down the line.
The expectation, though, is that this, if you want to call it a house flippers tax, by increasing the capital gains inclusion rate for those who are selling secondary properties, this is existing homes, not floor plans.
No, it would apply to everything.
We don't know that yet.
No, but if there was, I guarantee you, if any government, an Ontario or federal government, deals with this situation, they're going to deal with every single trade of real estate, whether it's an existing stock of real estate or a contract that you're selling real estate. By the way, I got to tell you, there's not a lot of reselling of contracts taking place in Toronto. Banks don't want it. Developers don't want it. Typically don't allow it. And if they allow it at the very end of a project where it's mostly sold out and completed, and that new person trying to sell that inventory is not competing with their unsold inventory.
So there's a disconnect, and all we have is Vancouver at this point to really go on, because there was talk about bringing in the Vancouver 15% foreign buyers tax. Some argue, well, it's such a small part of the overall picture of 5%, 10%. Right. Others saying, well, you do that, you're going to skimp the market, and you can see it in that rollover. But that city was already rolling over in that housing market. Is it not just an apples to oranges comparison between Toronto and Vancouver?
Well, listen, what happens when markets get stupid, and the Toronto market is getting stupid, is it naturally unwinds itself because people can't afford to buy. So without any government intervention, the market's going to slow down on its own. It will. People, when we get to $1,000 or $1,200 a foot for a condominium, that eliminates most people from buying. So there'll be a natural slowdown. What happened in Vancouver is that was happening already. What the tax did is it scared people. In my opinion, and there's a CIBC report out right now that I think is the most accurate real estate report currently on this situation, that also states that there's a very high possibility that local buyers just stepped back and said, you know what, we're going to wait and see what this tax does to prices. And they put off their buying or delayed their buying. Right. And I believe that in short order, within 3 months to 9 months, maybe a year, Vancouver will be right back up to 20+% increases.
The argument was made, though, that those foreigners who are buying as investments, they've got the money. They don't care if it's 15 additional percent.
That's not true.
If that's the case, though, then that sort of puts the kibosh on the idea that we could trigger a recession in this country by builders pulling back.
No, see, so the reason why we'd have a recession potentially, and that's if everything lines up in a negative fashion, is that forget about the resale market. I'm talking about the new development business. We cannot build buildings unless we sell them ahead of time. If we don't have those large number of investors that buy without all the scrutiny that a typical home buyer makes, investors don't make decisions the way home buyers do. And so if we don't have those people buying apartments with limited information at the very early stages, we can't borrow the money to build the buildings. The buildings don't get built. If the buildings don't get built, this whole city, listen, if you look back at the last 15 years, why we're here, this amazing, organic, crazy growth of this city, where we have Nobu coming. We have a Four Seasons, one of the best in the world. We have a Ritz-Carlton. We have all these five-star hotels. They wouldn't have happened without the investment in condominiums. And if we stop it, if we turn the tap off, and I'm telling you, if we do this 15% tax, new condo buyers will not buy condominiums with a 15% tax if they're foreigners.
But it comes back to the idea that the foreigners, if they're buying it for an investment, they know it's going to continue to appreciate in value. Therefore, 15 additional percent is the cost of doing business in any major metropolitan city.
That's not true, though. It's not every major metropolitan city that has
data yet. Neither of us do.
No. But there are cities that have 15% taxes. I mean, London has a foreign buyer's tax.
And no one can live there.
Well, exactly. And so there are cities that have foreign buyer taxes. And I'm not saying that there's not a time in Toronto's future where a foreign buyer tax might be important. Right now, in the resale market, which is what the political issue is, the typical happy couple trying to buy a house are having a hard time. It's not because of foreign investors. It's because of municipal government and provincial government not doing what they needed to do to free up available land and density. That's the only reason, and I'll tell you why that's the case. The volume increase right now is 5% year over year, last 5 years. It's 5% this year, 5% last year. The amount of available inventory is down 50%. Supply is down 50%, demand's up 5%.
Okay, so of the land you currently own that does not have a hole in the ground, what percentage of it is stuck at the Ontario Municipal Board level or at any other red tape level versus what are you setting aside waiting for prices to appreciate before deciding now it's time to put a hole in the ground?
We're not sitting. We have 15 development sites in Toronto, all in a queue. And I'm going to tell you that it used to take us 4 years to get a building from start to finish. It's now almost 7 years. And you know why it's 7 years? The City of Toronto Planning Department. They are stalling out development on a massive scale. Every one of my projects goes to the OMB. Every single one.
Do you have any greenfields that you're waiting for the prices to continue to climb before putting a shovel in the ground? Because to your point about the CIBC report, Benny Tal pointed out that there are developers who are holding back inventory, waiting for prices to climb even further.
Now, there's far more developers being stymied by the city. There's development sites that have been basically eliminated from the future stock of high-rise because they don't, for instance, possibly meet with all the criteria of the new high building guidelines that the City of Toronto's enacted. Listen, what we have to do here is we have to solve our supply problem. It's going to be a 5-year problem to get this geared up, but we need the provincial government to put a big push on infrastructure. We need the municipalities around Toronto. There's lots of green-belted land available. We need them to rush those sites to market, and we need the City of Toronto to change its attitude. Even the citizens, the NIMBYs, we need them to change their attitude about development. If we don't get more density downtown and in the 905, house prices are going to spiral far higher than they are now.
Before we let you go, you said that that Toronto housing market is getting stupid.
Yes.
So it's your assessment it's not already stupid?
No.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Brad Lamb is the president and CEO of Lamb Development.